So to close out the morning, we have the riveting topic of how to prepare for a potential recession. It's probably also just good things to know about your business anyway. So I want to welcome to the stage from Summit CPA, Jody and Audrey, who are going to take us through how to prepare for the potential recession. Come on up.
Woo!
The comedy stylings of Summit CPA.
It is going to be riveting.
Yeah, hold your applause, hold your applause. First of all, I'd like to thank Carl. I don't know if everybody knows, but we're going on our 6th year with the Bureau, which is pretty exciting. And the funny part about it was the first one I went to was actually in New Orleans. So it's pretty cool. Yeah, it was a fun time.
We almost lost him last night at Harris.
Yeah, I showed up at 6 in the morning coming out of the casino. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's light out here. I got to talk in a few hours. Just want to say thanks again. Appreciate it. And wherever Ruben is, you kicked it, buddy. That's a nice job. So super job, Ruben. Okay, so what my talk is today, I'm gonna start off. Anytime I start this thing off, I'm not a really good public speaker, and so it's one of those things that I've got to really kind of think, how am I going to start this off? And I couldn't think of anything. Man, I couldn't think of anything forever. And he told me about this topic months ago. I thought, well, thanks, Carl, recession. This is going to be a fun topic. And I thought, well, heck, what's going on? And so it just happened. I was talking to a gentleman yesterday, and he's like, after the conversation, it was actually a prospect call type of thing. And after the conversation, I said, you know what? Hey, I'm going to talk about a recession. Do you have any tips for me? He's like, yeah, I do actually. I'm like, well, what's that tip? And he's like, well, tell him the secret. I'm like, tell him the secret? Well, don't you think you should tell me the secret? And he's like, well, he goes, tell him the secret. And everybody took the oath, right? So it's going to be the secret, right? I mean, it's going to stay in here. No videotaping, no taking pictures. So he said, take the secret. And I'm like, okay, well, I can do that. And so I thought, well, but I'm kind of nervous even showing you the secret, really, because it's a secret. And so when we looked at it, this is what he said.
Novel idea.
Yeah, okay, but he said there's more to the secret. I'm like, more to the secret? Okay. What could that be? Okay, well, I'm done. Thanks, Carl. I appreciate it. Recessions. I mean, what do you talk about recession? If you hear the news that recession's always ugly and all that kind of stuff. Well, a couple fun facts to just kind of start things off with the recession. The definition of a recession is when the gross domestic product goes negative for 2 quarters. So that's 6 months. So fun fact is we've got 6 months for sure that we're not going to have a recession, right? So that's a cool thing. Plus, the gross domestic product hasn't been negative in 11 years because we've gone through the biggest economic boom that the United States has ever had. So that's kind of a cool thing, too. Also, recession happens about every 4 years. Kind of cool. It's been 11 years. Kind of cool. Recessions, with the recession, also a typical recession lasts 11 months. Anybody realize that? It's only 11 months. So what I'm talking about today, really we're planning on preparing on is for 11 months. That's really it. So kind of think about it. The longest recession ever was the Great Recession. That was 1 year and 6 months. Seemed like it was forever when you guys went through there. The shortest that we've had just recently was the dot-com boom, or the dot-com burst, I guess, what you want to call it. That was about 8 months. And that seemed like a long one too. And so with the recession, we're looking at a short period of time. So recessions, it happens every 4 years. And also, I've been through it myself 7 recessions in my lifetime. So you can kind of guess how old I am then. So the first recession, there's 4 recessions I want to talk about real quick that I feel really, really, kind of made me or made our company. And the first recession was back when I was in 6th grade. A long time ago, 6th grade. There was the Iran oil contra. If you guys remember that, if you guys were even alive during that time, gas prices were horrible. I remember my parents being in the car and our car runs out of gas, going to the gas station, that type of thing. It was really a humbling experience. It really taught really humility, because my parents, they weren't wealthy. My dad was a police officer. My mom worked for a construction company, administrative office type thing. And with that, my mom lost her job. That happens in housing. Housing goes down, you lose your job. Bad thing, right? I thought it was a cool thing because my mom was not home. We could actually, see my mom every once in a while because she wasn't working. But also, it was kind of funny because what I learned there is they took the big things and they sacrificed the small things. And what do I mean by that? Right now we take it for granted that, hey, let's put our kid in this basketball thing. Let's put them over in this travel thing. Let's do all these fun stuff because we want our kids to do really well. My parents were like, happening. Not playing hockey. Sorry, too expensive. We can't afford it right now. As a kid, you didn't understand that, right? But, it's one of those things, the small thing, because the big thing was we had to pay the mortgage. We had to pay the, automobile. That's much more important than the hockey game. We'll put you in baseball. It doesn't cost anything. That's the type of sacrifices that they had to make. And I've carried that on throughout my entire life. That was a huge win for me going through that and what I learned there. The next one was in 2001, which was huge for me because in 2001 that was the dot-com burst there, and with that we started Summit CPA Group a month later. Kind of cool. So we started it right after the recession, owed everything. Adam and I went out there and we thought, hey, we're gonna do it. We got no money. No one else does anyways. So let's go ahead and figure this out and start it up. The next one was, just a few years later, which was the Great Recession. And what that recession taught us is we had to really kind of look inward a little bit because we weren't a strong company. We're probably $500,000 in revenue at that point. Now we're like $6 or $7 million. So we grew tremendously since then. And with that, it was one of those deals that we didn't have enough money to have an accounts receivable. We couldn't afford it. We couldn't go to the bank and get anything. No one lends during a recession, that type of thing. So it's like, well, how can we do something that people really want, that can really help people out? And that's when we started offering the virtual CFO service, way back before any accounting firm ever did. It was one of those things that we wanted to spend a lot of time with basically owners and trying to help them get through this really tough period of time. And it's when it really started off, and it was really what made us what we're at today. And that's the cool thing about it was that innovation period, basically, that it was one of those things. Apple did the same thing during one of the recessions. They came out with the iPod, and boom, all of a sudden Apple's going from a small computer thing to this huge, well, kind of huge company. and so what I'm saying is the recessions are, really, there's a lot of good that can come out of that. But my favorite recession of all was back in 1969 when I was born. Not gonna say much more about that. But kind of where are we at today? So it's important to understand that the economy, where we're at today, jobs are up. Everybody's seeing the news. Wages are increasing. Profit margins of companies are going up. The latest survey that I saw with a digital agency came back in October, and they surveyed, I think it was 110 agencies, and out of those agencies, I'd say the average agency was about $5 million in revenue, somewhere in that ballpark. And they showed 80% of them showed growth over the prior 12 months. That's pretty cool. But that's not the important part. The important part is the profit margin, right? If you grow without profits, no big, why would you do that? 75% of those same companies actually grew their profit margin at the same time, which is pretty cool. So the economy is going really well in that regard. Inflation's rising gradually, which is always a good sign. And then, of course, everybody's 401ks and everything. You're kind of feeling that benefit there. But that really doesn't mean anything, right? Because, with the recession, the way that the economic cycle works is that you have, again, this is Econ 101, you've got the expansion, which is what we're going through right now, the 11 years. And when it hits that very top, that ceiling, then it starts going down. That's when the GDP starts falling down, and then it comes back up. Hits the floor and comes back up. With that, we're right here in the green. There's the recession, and then we're popping back up. It's normal. It happens all the time. It's nothing bad about it. It just basically is what it is, and it's been that way forever. So with that, it's nothing to fear in that regard. So, is it coming? Well, you guys watch the news?
try not
Shit,
to.
turn that damn stuff off. Jesus, criminy. Those guys are horrible. It was kind of funny. I did a lot of research on it. I'm like, oh, hey, I'm going to quote some people and all this kind of stuff. So I thought, I got this economist that he's got all these really great stats, and I'm watching his YouTube video, and he said, hey, the recession's going to happen in 2020. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. It's good information. I'm going to share it with everybody. Then I started doing some research on it, and I saw the same guy, same video, a little different. I started watching it. He's like, yeah, the recession's going to happen in 2019. I'm like, okay. And then I kept going. It's like, same guy. It was like 2018. It was like, man, every year he's predicting the recession to happen that year. But guess what? You know, when he's right, he's going to be the guy you see on all the TV channels. Hey, I predicted this recession to happen, right? Yeah, of course he is. So what I recommend is do not watch the news. Get rid of it. Don't predict it. Don't use it as a predictor, because the gross domestic product is based on consumption. It's based on everybody spending. You know, when we start seeing people quit spending, then that's when we actually see what we call a recession. So there's 5 indicators that I'm going to talk about real quick for something that you can actually kind of look out for yourself to kind of give you an idea. The first one is what we call this inverted yield curve. Basically what it means is short-term and long-term bonds. You know, one's higher than the other. They flip-flop. People want to invest long-term, and it drives that rate down. And you know, that's a cause. They call it the inverted yield curve. And typically about 15 months later is when a recession hits. Pretty normal. It inverted back in August, so can kind of give you an idea. So we're looking probably 2021, assuming that it stayed inverted, but unfortunately it flipped back around the very next month. So it's kind of weird. Corporate profits, I just mentioned that before. They're continuing to climb, but when you start to see them drop, about 2 years later, recession. Unemployment, a little quicker. You start seeing that increase a little bit. About 6 months, you're looking, typically for a recession. Housing market, about 5 months. And this leading economic index, which, unless you're an econ major, you probably don't even know what that is. But anyways, I don't know what it is either. But anyways, it's about 4 months.
We'll Google it later.
Yeah, if you can Google it, let me know in a break. I appreciate it. So about 4 months, it's that. So again, there's a lot of things out there to kind of give you that heads up. But the big thing is that, hey, it's going to happen. It's inevitable. Don't be afraid of it, but be prepared. And that's the key there. You got a 6-month window for sure. And more than likely this year being as good as the economy is right now, you've got a year to plan for this thing. Mm-hmm. Okay?
So on the note of planning, as Jody said, we know it's coming. What do we do now? So the very first thing I'm going to give you guys is a to-do list. Anybody that knows me, I'm very OCD, and I love my to-do list. Trello board is where I hold mine. For me, the to-do list, it stemmed from my uncle, and I'm not going to tell my uncle, but my uncle really made some mistakes in the most recent recession. I've personally only been around for one recession. We're not going to talk about
She's
Jody's
11 years
age,
old.
but
She's 11 years old.
I was older than 11, but a little less experience than Jody. But the one thing I remember is my uncle. He had this booming technology business up in Massachusetts. He had always been very successful. That was what I knew him as, and he, turns out, didn't plan very well. He didn't know it was coming. He didn't have these conversations, and when the recession came, he hadn't saved. He hadn't planned for retirement. He was in probably his 50s at that point, and it ended up hurting him a lot worse than he expected, and the recession was relatively short at that point, but he, in his 60s, then had to start over, start a brand new business, and he did, but he learned the second time around. So the very first thing I saw him do, which we want to make sure you guys don't do, is don't panic. So the thing that I picture is you're driving down the road and a deer jumps out in front of you. You can do 2 things. You're gonna have to course correct. You can slow down. You can maybe turn your wheel a little bit. What you don't want to do is overcorrect. We don't want to flip our car, but you do want to correct. So let's not panic. We know it's coming. Go ahead and prepare yourself now. Don't get too anxious, and give yourself some time. So we want to start now. 6 months to a year and a half, 2 years. Nobody really knows, but if you start now, you're going to be in a much better position when it does come. And the very first thing we want to do is create a forecast. So some of you probably have, we'll call it a budget. A forecast is going to be more dynamic. You can come into a forecast and you can play with scenarios. You can figure out what might happen if I lose a big client, what might happen if I have to let someone go, change your numbers, figure out how that impacts the rest of your company and for how long. So we want to build a forecast. The next thing is get a handle on your finances, and this is very much twofold. So personally, We want to come home, work with our family, figure out how we're feeling about it, and make sure that you are ready and your anxiety as it relates to your personal finances is at bay by the time the recession comes. As a business owner, you guys know you are your business and your business is you. So if at home you're feeling anxious and your finances aren't in a good place, that anxiety is going to come to the office with you and it's going to impact your decisions at the office. So we want to make sure that we get a handle on your finances. So as it relates to your finances, so this is kind of a shameless plug, but for anybody that's read Jody's book, you'll have seen this picture, and I love it. I think it's a genius image. So the boulder is the recession. We know it's coming. We know we're going to have to go over this boulder. Is it going to be a pebble in the road, or is it going to be a boulder, and what are we going to be driving? So if we're in this little scooter, I'd prefer to be in the Vespa, but for purposes of the recession, we want to be in a monster truck. You want to be able to be armed, you want to be prepared, and you want to be able to just ride right over it, no problem. Again, we know it's coming, but you want to prepare yourself. So for anybody that's heard us talk, you always hear 10 to 30%. For cash, we want to have 10 to 30% of trailing 12 months revenue. So let's say in the last year you made $1 million, 10% of that to 30% of that, we want $100,000 to $300,000 in the bank. We've run the numbers a number of times, and what that means is somewhere between 2 to 6 months of expenses. 2 to 6 months of expenses can get you through more than half of the potential recession. A lot of these things are going to be easier said than done, but we'll sort of walk through a couple of ways to build your cash. But building cash is definitely the first thing that we want to focus on. Second thing, paying off debt, which goes against building off cash, but it all comes back to the anxiety. Debt gives people anxiety. If you get rid of your debt, or if you at least decrease your debt, by the time the recession comes, you're going to be feeling better. You're going to feel like you really, chipped away at that and worked really hard by the time it came. You're going to have less to worry about. So the first thing that I suggest when paying off debt is take a look at how much debt you have, take a look at your different vehicles, figure out what has the highest interest rate, start with that. Interest, you're essentially throwing away money for interest. It's a necessary evil, but we want to start with throwing away the least amount of money possible. So go to your highest interest rate loan, start to work at that. Every single month, come back to your cash reserve and figure out, if that 10%, maybe we up the 10% goal to 15% because we know the recession's coming, and you end the month with 16%. Take that 1%, pay off some of that loan. So paying off debt is going to definitely be something that we want to focus on, and then making your money liquid. So this is personal and business. Personally, we want to make sure that we have access to our money. This is not the time to go buy that Tesla, not the time to go buy that new fancy schmancy house. And on the business side, same thing. We're not looking to go buy a building. We're not looking to go buy something and lock up your cash. We want to have it somewhere that's accessible. So money markets, CDs, bonds from a personal standpoint, and then from a business standpoint, let's put it in a high yield interest savings account. You're making money, and you can access it whenever you need it. We'll go back. So getting a line of credit. This is really important, and that first slide of we want to start now, go ahead and Monday morning, if you don't have a line of credit, this is the first thing on your list. Go ahead and call the bank now. Because what happens is when a recession comes, banks do not want to give debt. They're much less likely to, but right now things are looking good, the economy is looking good, your business is probably doing pretty well. It's a lot easier to get debt now when things are going really well. So we want to get a line of credit, and from the standpoint of how much, you want the same amount that you had for your cash reserve, that's how much you want in your line of credit. So if our goal is 15% for your cash reserve, you want 15% of your trailing 12-month revenue for your line of credit. Put that together, again, we've got that 6 months of cash that can get us through more than half of the recession. The other thing to mention about line of credit, which is interesting and people don't think about, most of the time you have a 1-year renewal rate. If you up that to 2 years, you can get through an entire recession without ever having to come back to the bank and ask for a renewal on the line of credit. So just take a stab at it. It's likely they may say no, but likely they're going to say yes and up that renewal period. It'll get you through the whole recession. So improving inefficiencies, these are all things that we highly recommend taking a look at now. Things are going well, you've got a head start, you know that you're gonna have to do some stuff to get ready for the recession. Start to work on your processes now to make them better so that when the recession comes and things do inevitably slow down, you started at the best place possible. So the first thing is tightening your AR timeline. So this guy is intended to be the annoying person. The number one thing we suggest is squeaky wheel gets the grease. Like the more annoying you are, the more likely you are to get paid. So number one thing, just be super annoying. Reach out to all your customers. It's going to help with collections. The second thing, which is a little bit longer term, is you want to set up good processes. So you want to come up with a policy that's going to not only work, but that also you're going to stand by. Whether it be 5 days before you send out the invoice, you reach out to the AP department, make sure they know it's coming. You send out the invoice. 5 days after the invoice, you ask if they have any questions. 5 days after that, you hit the due date and you call them and let them know it's due. And you do that every single time so that your customers know they're going to hear from me 5 days after. I'm going to go ahead and make this payment because I just don't want to have to hear from them. People don't like talking about money. Go ahead and set that policy now and stick to the system. That's absolutely going to help with an AR timeline. So for this industry, 45 days is average. There are a number of companies that are well below that, but if you're anywhere above 45 days, we want to do some serious work on tightening that because, again, everything is going to extend when the recession comes. So it's going to end up being 60, 70, 80, 90 days. If you start below 45, you're still going to go up. It's inevitable, but you're going to go up to a lower number. So let's start as low as we can. Decrease your average sales cycle. I just love Alec Baldwin. So decreasing your average sales cycle, again, another one that's easier said than done, but we want to channel our inner Alec Baldwin. The number one thing that's going to help here is just respond quicker. It's a psychology thing. Like if you reach out to a company and you're looking for a new service and they respond to you within a couple of minutes, you're going to feel like that person's going to take care of you when you finally decide to work with them. So the quicker we respond, the more likely we are to close sales. In addition to that, we find actually at our company that it really helps to just be 100% transparent. We basically have a quoting tool that we sit with our clients and you can literally tick, 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 yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, and you see how the bottom line changes, how the quote changes. There's no negotiation. There's no misunderstanding of what we might be charging you. Like it's very clear. And they walk away understanding exactly what they're paying for, and it makes it a lot quicker because they're not feeling concerned or feeling like they're getting gypped. So try to make if there's something like that you've been wanting to do, now is the time to implement it so that by the time the recession comes, it is already extremely well in place, you understand it, and your customers are already used to it. So trimming the fat. This is something that you want to be careful about doing. So trimming the fat is, a lot of people think from the panic standpoint, like, are there people we need to let go? Do we need to, go around to all of our vendors and ask for longer, payment terms? There are a lot of different things that you can do, but the number one thing is going to be just the super low-hanging fruit. I can guarantee every single person in this room on their P&L has some subscription that they're paying for monthly that they're not using. So go check those things out. They are really small, but they do add up, and they drop directly to your bottom line. So the number one thing we're looking for is to build cash. To build cash, you have to drop money to your bottom line, and from that standpoint, cutting unnecessary expenses is the number one easiest way to do it. So take a look at those things first. Secondly would be your people. So we don't want to let go of the people that matter the most and that are going to keep us going throughout the recession, but what we do want to do is be honest with ourselves. If there's been someone that you've been holding on to for a while, that you've been considering getting rid of for a long time, it's going to be a lot harder to get rid of that person when the recession comes, and they're probably going to be the first person you're going to want to get rid of. So go ahead and honestly do them a favor. Have that conversation now while they can go out and get another job. When the recession comes, you let them go, they may not get another job. So from that standpoint, you're kind of doing them a favor. But in addition to that, you're getting rid of these hard decisions that are going to become harder once the recession comes. So just go back to your leadership team, start to have those conversations and figure out what do we need to do today that's going to make things easier once it comes. So playing out scenarios is something that as a team you want to do. This is not an owner by himself in a room, by herself in a room, talking through what could possibly happen to the business. This is a full leadership team all getting together. You've got your dynamic forecast. You can change your numbers. You can ebb and flow and see how it's going to impact you. And the purpose of it is to to take that anxiety and the uncertainty out so that by the time those decisions come and those scenarios actually happen to you, you can say, we talked about this. 6 months ago or a year ago when we had a clear mind, we talked about this, we knew what we decided to do, we're good. Like, we already know what our decision is. So they're really not worst case scenarios, they are realistic case scenarios. I mean, all of these things are definitely gonna happen to us. So losing a big client is the first one that everybody thinks about, and in the agency world, customer concentration is definitely a thing. I'm sure there are many of you guys that have one or two, big fish customers that make up a huge portion of your revenue, and if that fish goes in the middle of a recession and you drop your entire top line by, call it 50%, you're gonna be in trouble. If you've built cash and you have that line of credit and you've done all these things that we've talked about to prepare, you're gonna be in a lot better place when it does happen. But what are you gonna do? Sit down with your leadership team and say, what are we gonna do when we lose that big fish? How long are we gonna wait until we have to let go of someone? If we have to let go of someone, who's it gonna be? Would we take a hit ourselves on our salary? There are a number of different things that is gonna make sense to you when you start to talk through it, but you wanna come into your forecast and change up your numbers and see how you would do. Longer to close sales. So again, the sales cycle is something that we wanna tighten before we get to the recession because it is absolutely going to take longer. So things like decreasing your prices, decreasing your rates, it could help, it could hurt. The other thing you want to think through is if you decrease your rates, you're stuck with that 11 months later when the recession's over. So be really careful that you're not doing something now that you're going to regret later. But again, talk through these things. Sales decreasing, so this is something that a number of the people that we work with are trying to get more into recurring revenue, maintenance, that type of thing. When you have your sales decreasing during a recession, if you have that recurring revenue to lead back on, you're going to be in a little bit better of a scenario at that point. So you want to be careful to start thinking about that stuff now and not wait until the time comes when you need it. Projects pausing, this is another one that happens to all of us all the time. If you have in the back of your pocket some short-term contracts, little 3-month, 2-month, 1 month, whatever it is, that one of your customers comes to you and says, we just can't pay you. Like, it's going to be a couple of months. Can we just pause? At that point, you can say, yeah, we've got this short-term contract to keep our people off the bench. We'll keep them busy for the next couple of months, no problem. But you have to think about that now and start to plan for it now in order for that to be able to work.
Yeah, I think what Rob's great at this. What he says, he actually keeps those in his back pocket, and maybe it's the real cheap deal. Maybe it's the church or something like that can't afford your normal services.
Yep.
Well, it's better to have them working and doing something, making money, than not working at all. Because again, you're looking at your average bill rate and utilization. So the important part is that one's got to go up, one's got to come back down. But what you don't want to do, like Audrey said, is you don't want to then go and do the GM project that's going to be 2 years,
Yep.
and have that at a low rate. That'd be a killer mistake.
Yeah.
So you got to be careful with that, but definitely take advantage of those opportunities for sure.
So as it relates to all of this stuff, it's all about planning. It's all about getting together with your leadership team now. Wipe out that anxiety so that by the time you have to make these decisions, you're ready, you're clear-headed, you've already planned for it, and make sure that when that time comes that you're not making decisions that you're going to regret once the recession's over. Don't fire your unicorn because you can't afford them, because once the recession's over, you're going to want that unicorn back. So just be really careful about the decisions that you're making and make sure you're not going to regret them once we head in the upward direction, because as Jody said, that's going to happen. The recession's going to happen and things are going to turn around.
Yeah, so kind of bringing it back to it, when we talk about the recession itself, it really comes around everybody in here as leaders, because you guys and gals, you've got to make those choices, and those choices are really tough. And it kind of reminds me, since I've got about 10 minutes left here, I'm going to tell you a story just because I can, and you've got to listen here. But anyways, if you know me, I talk a lot about my family. My kids are great. They both played college hockey. I've been married with my wife for 32 years. About got that wrong. Just about said 31. And with that, there's with my daughter, she's in her final year of college. She's playing games right now. It ends in a couple months. And as parents, we want to make sure, hey, we want to hit all of her different games. And so with that, we had a game last weekend in Finlandia. If anybody knows where Finlandia is, it's like the closest freaking little city next to Canada. Finland, yep. 36 inches of snow. That's what we're going into. It's like, wow, this is going to be great. And it's about a 10-hour drive from our house. So again, long drive, 10 hours. We're thinking, we're not going to do that. We're just going to fly. Great idea. Short thing is we fly up there, we fly back, we watch the game, great thing. We thought, hey, let's just go ahead and do it the same day the game is. So we're going to fly up there, watch the game that night, and then they have another game the next day. We'll watch that, then we'll fly back, right? That's the scenario. Well, here's what really happened. So the scenario is, the first flight goes to Chicago. Second flight goes to a little city by Finlandia. Well, nothing really bad ever happens when you travel, right? So we knew that going into it. And with that, it was one of those things where the flight got delayed again. So we're like at this airport for like 4 hours. And first of all, it got delayed for mechanical issues. I'm like, thank God it got delayed on that one. And then the second one was weather, and finally got canceled. So at that point, we had to decide, now what do we do? Hard decision, right? Do we go back home or do we actually go to the game? 6.5-hour drive. So we thought, let's just drive. And it's like, okay, we'll do that. We're going to drive. And so we go to the rental car place. I want the best vehicle you can have that has 4-wheel drive because I'm going to Finlandia. It is snowing 3 to 5 inches right now. We're gonna plow our way through it. And great idea. So they gave us this nice truck. Never driven a truck before, so that was kind of cool. And I'm like, this is really neat. So I'm like driving up to Finlandia there, and we get by Green Bay, which is way up there. And all of a sudden it starts snowing, like I thought it was going to start snowing. And I'm like, honey, get the, find out how do I get this in the 4-wheel drive. And so she gets up YouTube, and she's like going through YouTube, and she's like, it's this knob over on the right. And I'm like, okay, no knob. My vehicle didn't have 4-wheel drive on it. So I'm like, oh no. So I'm focusing now. I'm like, okay, I'm going through this stuff. It's like snowing. You can't see anything. It's horrible. So, we're following plows, and I'm going, and you see the back ends like flipping back and forth like this. I'm like, oh, this is bad. My knuckles are really white. And my wife's like, well, hey, honey, the game's about ready to start. And I'm like, okay. So we flip the game on. And of course, I'm not watching the game. Just so you guys know, I'm not watching the game. She's basically giving me the play-by-play. Lexi gets the puck, she shoots, she misses, and all that kind of stuff. And so I'm like listening to it, I'm focused, I'm driving, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is like taking forever. So my 6.5-hour drive was like 7.5, 8 hours. I'm getting up there, and we get through it all, and I get to Finlandia. First thing I go to, the bar. Meet all the other parents there. I'm like, man, did you guys have any problem with that? And they're like, no, we got in yesterday. No issues whatsoever. I'm like, okay, that's great. And so a lot of planning. So next day, watch the game. I'm at the airport, turning my car back in, and I just happened to ask the dude at the counter, I'm like, hey, what's the chances of getting delayed tomorrow? And he goes, there's no flights going out tomorrow. I'm like, no flights? He goes, no, the storm's coming back in. I'm like, oh no. So now what do I do? I'm like, well, hey, I got 9.5-hour, 10-hour drive. That's cool. Give me a 4-wheel drive truck this time. He's like, okay, I got the 4-wheel drive. I go, we're going to drive home. And so, we do that. My wife and I, after the game's over, we do that. We drive home. We have the best time. We stop at Lake Superior. We get our picture taken in front of these humongous waves coming in. We go over to Lake Michigan over here. We take a picture. It's completely, covered with ice. As we're driving home, we got the tunes on. We're listening to all kinds of, music and stuff like that. Probably why, when we got home, it's probably why we've been married for 32 years, that type of thing. Because we could, and because we did that. Now, why did I just bore you with that story? Well, think about it. The planning part's what? The people at the bar, they planned way ahead, right? They're ahead of the game. They made that decision, hey, we're going to get in just in case it snows. They all did. We didn't. They did. Yeah, great on my part there. And then the other thing is that attitude. With that attitude, I could have been like, gosh dang it, planes like yelling at the person at the counter. This is ridiculous. Pouting, driving back home, mad. No, we had the attitudes like, hey, we're going to get through this. We're going to figure out how to get through this storm. We're going to get there. The same thing with you as leaders. You've got to have that right attitude, right? You've got to have that positive attitude that, hey, it's going to be tough, but we're going to get through it. And that's the key thing. Again, we talked about cash being oxygen. You need it, right? That's Adam's big saying. Hey, cash is oxygen. You need that to breathe. And so that's the key there. You got that right attitude, that positive attitude, the glass half full, not half empty attitude when you're getting through this. Focus was the big thing. You know, I got my hands are like turning, knuckles are turning white as I'm driving up there. I'm focusing. My eyes are on the road. My wife's trying to interrupt me with this game. I'm like, okay, honey, I can't tell her to be quiet because she'd get mad at me. So I'm like driving. And so my focus is there. And that's got to be your focus. Your focus has to be razor sharp. You've got to make those right decisions. You can't be the people pleaser, at this point. You've got to be the leader. And that leader's got to be focused on making those decisions and making them pretty quickly. The vision, as we looked through everything, the vision was there. I was going to make it. I wasn't going to die on the side of the road. I was going to make it. No matter what I had to do, I was going to get there. And I was going to make the most of it as I got there. And that's what your vision has to be. You've got to be able to see that forecast. You've got to put those scenarios into play so that you can see how you're going to get there even when it's snowing outside, even when the snow's coming down so hard you can't even see in front of you, even when you get out and you're like scraping your windshield because it's freezing on top, that type of thing. You've got to be that person that gets out there and has that vision where no one else in your company might have, but you've got that vision that you're going to get through that type of scenario. Then the last thing is the culture. Keep in mind, whatever you do, your people are looking at you all the time. And when you're in crisis mode, that's when the true you comes out. What part of you is it going to be? Is it going to be the you that makes snap decisions, gets mad at everybody, does the stupid stuff, hides in the corner because they don't know what to do? Whatever you do is going to help you with that culture because people look up to that. People want to see that positive culture. And again, the marriage thing. 32 years because we made the best out of a situation, made the right decisions, made the best. And even if we had got a flat tire on the way home, we'd still have had a great time. Well, maybe. So it gets down to this last rule again here. You can't go broke with cash.
You guys should have heard him. I mean, this guy was hilarious. He goes, you can't go broke if you got cash. He said it like 5 times that way.
Yeah, because a great business can weather really any kind of storm, right? If you run your business well, you'll weather any storm. And that storm's going to come for sure. We looked at it there. And just be prepared. Prepare yourself, have the right attitude. Just kind of as leader, really make the most of the situation. Have fun doing it. Thank you.